This is a piece entitled "The Limits of Science," designed to start a discussion on the subject of scientific arguments. I don't put out many videos compared to some of my contemporaries. I usually wait until a subject is trending in which there's something that's missing and its absence is so profound this subject appears to be one-sided. For example, Stefan, in his video "Frankly Faithless," interviews his guest, the thinking atheist, by agreeing with everything he says. There's no scrutiny like there is with some other guests. Someone might think from watching this that the position you take is what makes an argument good or bad. That people of different beliefs can't be friends because the conclusions you draw are either enlightened or stupid. Now, Stefan has just posted a video that seems to put this to rest. Someone can say, well, I don't like the 10 Commandments because I'm a criminal. Therefore, disbelief is not something good people or smart people share because it's something very small. If it weren't for believers, atheists wouldn't know they were atheists. Just because you don't have faith doesn't mean the good things in your life come from atheism, per se. In his video, A Critique of Atheism, Stefan disputes the opinion that awareness of God is like the awareness of advanced physics we can't see, saying, in math and physics, the first rule is logical consistency, empirical validation, and verification. There are many such arguments that are given in a manner that sounds like this is the last word on the subject. Debates over drawing different conclusions was a mistake in the first place. And this is even delivered with a snarky attitude by people who can't believe they're debating the laws of physics with someone, which defeats the purpose of a healthy debate. I would much rather be impressed by someone who disagrees with me than if everyone drew the same conclusions until the discussion is effortless. I think people want to be challenged, which raises the very good question, is science irrefutable? If someone gives scientific facts to back up their personal opinion or choices, does that make their opinion science? And since I like to give examples in threes, my examples of this are atheism, health, and subjects considered the unknown. Many groups, atheists, health promoters, and professional skeptics like James Randi, have declared war on things that are unscientific. But they all direct their studies, their thirst for knowledge, only toward reinforcing their position, as opposed to science that questions it from a different point of view. And this has been refined so many times, they are no longer able to step outside of their interests and look at themselves, which raises the question, if the message of science is golden, then what science studies the messengers? Wikipedia defines scientific skepticism as the practice of questioning whether claims are supported by empirical research and reproducibility. Obviously, there is more to knowledge than just this one question, but the entire article is self-serving and doesn't acknowledge its own limitations, such as the concept of awareness, knowing something without proof, and disagreement between the sciences, archaeology versus history, physical health versus mental health, etc., which better reflects the diversity of human intelligence. An intelligent person knows that right now people are giving and receiving practical wisdom, either from personal experience or collective experience, wherever Sunday schools exist and outreach groups are meeting at people's houses, or congregations are assembling to music and applying this to their daily lives. If I don't agree with something, it doesn't mean I imagine they're all just mumbling to themselves or exchanging nonsense, or how would they continue to function? Because of this community, there are things believers have an easier time understanding than non-believers do. People's opinions are often supported by their success stories. Stefan has been very successful, which leads people to have faith in things like, if you work hard, you will prosper, which is in fact a truism. Let's say you and I live in a world where the work environment isn't what it used to be. Talent isn't rewarded. The fair deal between employer and employee doesn't seem to exist anymore. A non-believer may be forced to realize he may never succeed. As a Christian, I've been proven wrong about these misgivings so many times, I understand my life is not in my own hands. So I'm glad I didn't lose sleep over it. An atheist may very well ask, if you're so misinformed that you believe in a supreme being, how can you know this? The world is becoming increasingly analytical. Scientific spokesmen like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye have evolved, both of whom are aggressive debaters against religion and other subjects, alongside their regular lecture circuit as unbiased professionals. People are looking at things in ways they didn't just 10 years ago. Philosopher Noam Chomsky is saying there's no difference between terrorism and government-sponsored military campaigns. People are viewing themselves as units of a global society. There's pressure to live a one-world lifestyle, both physically and mentally, so that anyone who doesn't is singled out. There was a time when socialism was considered taboo in this country. Atheists seemed like one lone objector. Many people today, if they could step back into almost any moment in history, let's say the landmark religion versus science debate of 1925 between William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow, or back to the time of the prophets themselves, they would say, you are all idiots who aren't relevant to my life now. As if people in the past can be expected to do things beyond their means and seem like a useless naysayer. I don't mean to say science itself has changed. They just have to deal with things like creationism being taught in schools, or people who choose to smoke, so the arguments are louder. Nor does it mean we are wiser for it. Our advanced technology is often wasted on the most useless purposes. In my own evolution, something I've learned to do is look at things from outside our current society and its norms. Science is supposed to be universal. It has shown us how small we are and how short a time we have spent on the earth. So, by the same measure, what is its omnipotent view of our own understanding and how minuscule it is? as opposed to the position that today's science is the most enlightened it will ever be. Neil Tyson says, "The good thing about science is it's true whether or not you believe in it." In other words, science is something that just is. But his decision to be an agnostic or to promote science itself is a personal crusade because he had a bad experience, etc. A physicist who speculates about what exists outside the universe can ask questions like, are we real? And use scientific data to make his case. One thing I see is when something becomes popular, it and science become one. At doctors' offices, there are flat screens now which don't play regular TV channels, but recirculating material like this commercial where people are shown excluding themselves from a family meal, refusing to stop at fast food chains, and playing outside with the grandkids when it's raining, all to promote a product most viewers will never use. But the subliminal message gets across. And it's obvious to me what unscrupulous propaganda this is. Is it true that substituting the family meal with exercise every day would be good for your cardiovascular system? Sure. Does that mean it's not propaganda? No, those are two separate things. In a slightly different society where medical science advances so we can live as we choose, patients who are at higher risk would get the most care. But in this system, they are turned down for being unhealthy. It's dysfunctional. This is because people use scientific knowledge to promote certain goals instead of other goals. James Randi, who back in the 80s offered a $10,000 reward to anyone who could prove that psychic powers exist, founded an organization that presents the Pegasus Award, a badge of shame to whoever makes the most unwanted contribution to anything that's considered bunk, in order to discourage various unrelated subjects. Winners have included Isaac Bashevis Singer in 1980 for declaring a belief in demons, CVS Pharmacy for supporting homeopathic medicine, the Sci-Fi Channel for promoting paranormal mysteries as a form of entertainment, and the White House, which is described by Randi as being faith-based. What do any of these have in common besides the fact that they're considered taboo? Likewise, Bill Nye makes appearances where he debunks people who have seen strange things. When the servicemen who witnessed the Rendlesham UFO encounter in 1980 told their story, he objected to their claims based on his belief that extraterrestrials don't exist, which is flawed reasoning. Being a witness to something isn't a conclusion. Whether an advanced civilization has visited Earth is not only not knowable, it could happen very easily without our knowing it. People accept certain things as unquestionable when, in fact, they're promoted because somebody wants to promote it. So the question remains, is science irrefutable? I think it's a worthy question, and I have three arguments you can use to counter people who use science itself to back up their opinions. Number one, people tend to use the easiest examples they can think of to prove a point. So I ask them, instead of giving a trademark case, what is the most difficult example that actually challenges you to prove that what you're talking about is universal? Health and fitness promoters always use an athlete who is eating an apple as an example of good health. So what would be the most challenging example of health? There are many chain smokers who never get lung cancer, and obese people who don't have any complaints to prove there is a health that comes with genetics and a health that comes with being young. When you say only athletes are healthy, it makes people wonder, then why are unhealthy people doing so well? My second argument I call the man from the future argument. Today's historians scrutinize the past with a superiority that will itself be scrutinized someday. If someone living 200 years from now could speak to us, they wouldn't see these discussions as enlightenment versus ignorance. Their perspective would be greater than that. So in the atheism versus God debate, let's replace God with man from the future. I know that if you met this person, they could probably tell you things that would blow your mind. This is something I can't physically prove, but nevertheless I'm aware of. If this person told you that early 21st century science is considered primitive and biased in his time, that we turned out to be wrong about some things, how would you refute such a claim? He could say we make up names for everything that is actually nameless, that science has advanced based on random and arbitrary discoveries and individuals that could just as easily have been different finds in individuals, that we feel superior to previous civilizations when we aren't much different from them. But promoters of science are only accustomed to dealing with people who know less than they do. They don't imagine, for example, representing Earth at a meeting of civilizations someday, where our conventional science is considered kindergarten because we have to use words. We are not prepared for such epiphanies, so they don't know there are things that challenge science itself. Now, you could say the basic premises of physics are true regardless of our interpretation. The problem with this is science makes everything either common knowledge or laughable. And most people don't understand that if there had been different scientific discoveries or individuals, the things we are so certain about would not be the same. If you found out that something considered incontestable is going to be proven in 20 years' time, let's say ghosts, and people are asking, how did we know such a thing doesn't exist? What would be the explanation for today's conventional wisdom? I've been trying to think how to explain that science is true, but our perception is flawed. Tell me what you think of these. From an omnipotent perspective, today's scientist is like a man sitting at a table with 3 cups. And he says, these are the 3 laws. Anything on the table has to be under one of these or it doesn't exist. Another analogy would be scientific discovery is a mountain people from all time periods are climbing. A climber from the early 1900s and a climber from the future look at each other thinking how ridiculous they are, but the mountain itself doesn't care what kind of methods they have. My third argument is this. When I was in school, it was not written in textbooks that the United States overthrew the elected government of Guatemala, starting a civil war, or that we did the same in Iran. Speakers like Neil Tyson proclaim science that is widely known. But if CIA documents reveal someday that the Higgs boson particle was discovered in secret back in the 70s, I certainly wouldn't put it past them. If mid-20th century technology created a split between science that is known to everyone and classified science, how would we know what is refutable? The inclination to think if a culture is not scientifically advanced, or if it is faith-based, then it must be ignorant, is an assumption that science itself is incapable of ignorance. It's like a bird that looks down at everything else. Science must also think ahead beyond its own knowledge. Otherwise, what we have is a subjective science that doesn't allow anything to know more than it does. Remember, empirical has the word empire in it, and it serves a purpose to be this way. And yet, they claim science is not a belief system, and atheism is not a religion, in which case these spokesmen are not its true mouthpiece. There are many arguments against this. I would like to see specific ones on the message board or in video form. One last speculation I had while writing this is when someone says society does this, society does that, what is society? Is it no longer valid to say we as a people do those things if we can voluntarily exclude ourselves? I did it again. Thanks for listening.